that are not canned properly. Botulism spores can't be seen, tasted, smelled. You don't know they're in the food. It takes only 4 spores. Remember, you can't see, taste them, know they're there. It only takes 4 spores to make you sick. And botulism causes respiratory paralysis and death. We are seeing an insurgence or an increase in botulism in food, botulinum. Some from unpasteurized honey, some from improperly canned foods, because people want to can again and get back to. So if you're doing it, you need to make sure you follow the proper recommendations. So I'm going to go back to the jellies because that's what we're doing here. So on the jellies, we're going to let this do its little thing, the rest of its minute, and then we're going to take the biggest, see, I couldn't find my spoons, I'm down to Christmas spoons at my house. I'm going to have children clean everything they own. So you take the biggest silver spoon you have, you use a pan that's not reactive, you don't want to use an aluminum pan, you want to use a stainless steel or enamel pan. And when I turn this off, I'm going to take and I'm going to skim the foam off of my jelly, and the foam will be attracted by the silver spoon. Don't ask me what math that is or science, but it'll actually come so that as I move my spoon around the pan, the foam just comes off of my spoon. And that's important because if you don't skim it, you can put it in the jars and not skim it, but it's going to get cloudy later on. The other thing when people call, I'll say, are you going to make competition jelly or are you making it for your family to eat? Because if I'm going to make competition jelly to be judged, I'm going to skim for a long time. And if I'm making it for my family to eat, I might just put it in a jar and not worry about it. Really? That's right, it'll be gone anyway. So see, and you check the gel because it's already coating the spoon, so you know that it's going to set up later on. Okay. We're going to skim just a little bit more and move it over. And I'm going to talk about the jars. When you're canning and using your jars, we want to make sure you're using a jar proof for canning. Now, when you can, you're going to have to heat process. Anything you put in a jar has to be heat processed. You can't do something without heat processing. With jellies, it's using the water bath canner. If you're using some of the canning with low acid foods, you're going to have to use a pressure canner, you know, with the little thing on the top that jiggles and you have to be careful with. But you have to process it with heat. So the jars that you use, you want to make sure the jars you use are going to be jars that are heat tempered and can take the heat. So no reusing jars. You want to buy canning jars. Can you get canning jars at a garage sale or something? Yeah, you just want to make sure it's a canning jar with a jar thing. Now there's very few jar manufacturers. Most of them are owned by the same company. They just have different names on them. So you buy whatever kinds you want. But if you're going to get them from a garage sale or reuse them, you put your finger in here and you run your finger around the rim. Because if there's any little cracks or splits, when you put it in hot water, what's going to happen? And it only took me one batch of green beans with, I was 1 jar short, so I grabbed a mayonnaise jar and reused a mayonnaise jar, and I put it in the pressure canner, and guess what happened when I took the lid off the pressure canner? There was glass and stuff all over. So you don't want to waste your time and your money. So you run your finger around, make sure there's no cracks, you hold it up to make sure there's nothing the matter with the rim, and then you're going to put them in your boiling water for 10 minutes to sanitize them. Then you're going to put your jelly in. Now, of course, we're out here, so we're not going to do that today. But I'm going to pour it in here for you. And then you have your lids. The lids have a seal. The seal's a chemical seal. When you use your lids, you want to have lids new to the season. Now, the lids come in, is this a 2-part lid? Yes. The lids come in 2 parts. These are the ones that came with one of those little jelly kits. I got the jelly kit on clearance because the jars were cheaper than the other way. But the lids were over a year old, so I have to throw these away because that plastic seal is not guaranteed to use.
So buying from the garage sale, the jars are fine.
The jars, but not the lids. You want to go to the store every canning season and get you new lids and 2-piece things. Now there are 2 pieces to this. There's your little lid and your rim. This is meant so that you can take and use this. Once it's sealed and set up, you should be able to take your ring off. And real, competition canners will let their jars, process the jars, let it set up, let it seal, and then they'll take their ring off. Because if you leave your ring on, what can happen underneath? It gets rust, and so they take the ring off. So truly, that's all you have to sit on the shelf. But I have teenagers who jostle things around, so I leave my rings on there so that if they get jostled, they have a better chance of the seal not breaking. So it's totally up to you and what you want to do. But again, you can see it has this little plastic coating, and that plastic coating is what's going to guarantee your seal. So it's only good for 1 year. You can't reuse them, and you can't use them the next year. So we're going to put our jelly in here, and again, we haven't skimmed it as much. But we're going to ladle some jelly in here. I'll try to skim it off. Now it says to use green food coloring, but I didn't use it. You can make it greener if you want to make it greener. And you're going to see the foam in here. The other thing to do is look at each recipe because it calls for headspace. And one of the main reasons that people, when they call and say, my jars didn't seal, I can't use my green beans. Well, that's because you didn't leave enough jar headspace, you left too much headspace. Okay, damp paper towel. See the stuff around the edge? Before you put the lid on it, you wipe it off with a damp paper towel. Any kind of canning, you do the same thing to make sure there's no wave, anything's under it. Stick it on, and then you put your band on, but you just turn it and stop. You don't do the extra turn, because what happens is when you put it in the boiling water or your pressure canner, the temperature in this jar is going to get higher than 212 degrees. You can't get higher than 212 degrees on top of the stove cooking. So the pressure and the heat are going to let the jar get hotter inside, and so it's going to get up to 230 or 240 degrees inside your little jars, and it's going to kill any bacteria that's left. And that's why it's important to go ahead and pressure can or sanitize, or pressure can or water bath your foods, depending on low acid or high acid. So this little baby is ready to go in, but again, I just do it till he's tied and no more. Now, can I set him on the shelf and eat him 2 weeks later? No, not unless I've water bathed him. If I've water bathed him, he can go on the shelf. If I haven't water bathed him, he needs to go in the refrigerator or the freezer. So that's your little jelly. Questions?
On sanitizing the jars, since most of the newer dishwashers have a sanitizer, okay.
Yeah, you have to boil them. They recommend boiling them for 15 minutes. What I usually do is clean my pot if I'm doing the water bath, and I put them in that pot just to boil them. And then I seal them and put them back in there when I'm going to do it. This is your water bath. You don't have to use this kind of pan. If you're going to use the baby jars, you could use this pan. What you want is the water to boil at least 2 inches high over the top of the jar. So I could put a dish rag in the bag at the bottom of this pot and put some of my baby jars in here, but I want my water to be 2 inches over the top when I'm boiling. So you get, this is just the, this is the old standby. I think I got this at an old hardware store. Sometimes you can find them at the Walmarts or H-E-B's, but I got this at an old hardware store.
You can buy it as a kit online from Ball. It includes the insert.
From
Ball.
Yeah, Ball. You can order from Ball. You get the Ball books, all the different pieces, so you can, Ball is a self-completed thing. It's got these little, it has the rack, so you can put your little jars in the bottom, except my jars are too little for this one, so I put a cup towel in the bottom or dish rag, and that'll hold your jars. And you can drop your jars down. Put them in when the water comes to a boil. You have the water boiling, drop your jars in. When the water comes to a boil, then you process over the length of time it tells you on your recipes. Jar lifters, you can buy the little jar lifters. I like these. You know, you have to have something that amuses you. This amuses me. Well, one has, he picks up the lid.
Oh.
So, the old lids you used to boil, you used to tell everybody, put them in boiling water. No. Now you put them in warm water, you don't put them in boiling water, but you do clean them off, put them in warm water, and then you can pick them up, and you got your little lid that you put on there. You don't have to touch it or have any kind of bacteria touch it. So that's what that's for. This is one of those little tools. If you see up top it looks like a step ladder, that's so you can judge your headspace. So if the recipe tells me I need 1/2 inch headspace, I can put my little thing on here and see what 1/2 inch headspace looks like, and then I can fill all my jars to make sure I have the right 1/2 inch headspace. The other thing that's important when you're canning vegetables, say I want to do my green beans. There's 2 ways to do green beans, hot pack and cold pack. Cold pack just means I stuff them in this jar and pour boiling water on them, and then I put them in my pressure canner and can. It's not recommended, but it's okay. The other way is hot pack, where you boil the beans in the water and then you put them in the jar so everything starts hot. But if I'm doing competition canning, are you going to do competition canning?
Competition eating.
If you really want them to look pretty, you put them in here, measure how big they would be, and then you cut them all the same length. Now you do want them about the same size.